First panel of the day, achieving XR scale in your organization. So I'm a big fan of this. In fact, one of the gentlemen on the panel, who's the president of the area, Mr. Paul Davies, talks about pilot purgatory. It's a term that we've picked up quite a lot in the area. So hopefully we're going to learn of how to get out of pilot purgatory and really scale. And I'd like to introduce Jonathan Martin from Magic Leap, who will be moderating the panel.
All right, thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate the introduction, Mark. My name is Jonathan Martin. I am Magic Leap's VP of Ecosystem, so all of the applications that are developed on top of our platform end up running through my team at some point. I'm joined today by an excellent group of panelists, and I'm excited to be in a room full of passionate people who love XR. I'm sure many of you have, over the years, had some amazing ideas. You sat in front of the whiteboard, you've mapped everything out, and you've said, okay, I think if I could just achieve this, I would totally transform my business. But there's a massive gap, as all of you know, between that initial idea and the actual practical deployment of augmented reality in the real world. So that is the topic of our panel today. We're going to discuss what it takes to actually go from that initial idea to really achieving scale. And there's a lot of hurdles along the way. There's a lot of ways that you can misstep. But fortunately, we have quite a few people joining us who have stepped through that process and have some lessons that they can discuss and some examples that they can explore with us. So we'll go ahead and have each of our panelists introduce themselves, just quick logistics. After introductions, we'll go through a set of questions. And then at the end, we will have a chance for you all to ask questions of our panelists. So please be ready to surprise them with something fun and interesting. We'll go ahead and get started. So Rich, we'll start with you. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Rich Beaudrie. I'm with Chick-fil-A. I serve on the digital learning team, where I get to do a lot of cool, innovative stuff along with modern learning, and I get to research and help implement a lot of cool new ed tech tools. So that's what I do at Chick-fil-A. That was it, right?
Yeah, that's good. Zohair.
Hey everyone, my name is Zohair Mehkri, part of Flex, and I'm responsible for the Flex Digital Twin organization. So thanks a lot for having me here.
Very good. And next we'll go to Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Davies. I am a technical fellow at the Boeing company. I work in Boeing Research and Technology. Work in immersive technologies and supporting our commercial defense and services business. And as Mark mentioned, I'm also the president of the area Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance.
Great, thanks for joining us. Emily.
Hello, my name is Emily Kodl. I am a solution architect at Newport Shipbuilding. I work in their innovation lab, where we do extended reality as well as mobile development and all sorts of research into machine learning and whatever else is kind of up and coming.
Great. And lastly, we're also joined by Kevin.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Dirscherl. I work at Lockheed Martin, and specifically I work on AR, MR deployment and program engagement. So really trying to get that tech out there.
Excellent, great. So we'll start with our first question. Zohair, I'm going to go to you first. So if you could describe a current XR project that you have that you've been deploying over the past few years and give a brief overview of that project, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So for those of you who joined yesterday, we talked about remote assistance and work instructions, so I won't do that one in case you were part of that panel. Well, what I will talk a little bit about is how we use it for, I think several people here are talking about learning. So we use virtual reality for being able to teach our team members different tasks. It depends. It varies a lot. Flex is a contract manufacturing company, so we make products for a lot of different segments, a lot of different customers. And so there's not one specific area where that's deployed. It attributes to the flexibility of the technology, right? Because you can repurpose it and so on. And so what we do is we use virtual reality for our team members to be able to learn different types of tasks, different machines. We have equipment that is I wouldn't say exactly standard. So, when you have a new person that joins the company, they need to be able to, learn the machine, learn how the equipment works, how to operate it, and so on. So we do that. A recent development is that we're actually starting to integrate that into our learning platforms and our learning systems and our employee tracking systems as well, so that you have your employee, and then you can see where in which area they've been trained in. So the technology is consistently advancing, right? So as it does, we want to integrate it more. So that's one example. I could keep going, but
yeah, no, that's great. Rich, I know you also have a passion for training and some ongoing projects. I'd love to hear more about those.
Yeah, essentially what we're doing at Chick-fil-A is we've created a job simulation training experience. So think flight simulator for training for our team members. So one of the areas we realized that a lot of our team members and on the job is so busy, and there's so much that they're doing, and frankly, a lot of the training that we give them is a little outdated. So I don't know if you have teenagers in the room. Anybody have teenagers? I mean, they definitely don't learn the way that we learned, do they? Right? Back in the day. So one of the things that is becoming more evident to us is that our team members, our workforce is evolving, and the way that they learned is much different than the way that we learned. And so we need something that engages them in a different way. And one of those ways is through VR. So we created this job simulator module that engages our learners the way they want to be engaged. With the VR training, it's process driven, so we have a lot of our tasks in the back of the restaurant that are very process driven. So how can we simulate that in a way that allows team members a chance to practice repetitively, to build that muscle memory, so that at the end of the day, they're focused on what we like to do best at Chick-fil-A, is that's care for you all. So how can we be the world's most caring company? Well, let's try to build some muscle memory so we can focus on you all rather than focusing on making a milkshake.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emily, I'm going to ask you the same question. I'd love to hear some more about what's going on at Newport News.
Sure. So we've had some success with various pilots and proofs of concept with augmented reality, but we've seen great success with our virtual reality training program. At the shipyard is a very dangerous place, so we have a lot of emphasis on safety as well as on build quality. So what we have built is a platform that allows instructors within the shipyard to create scenarios with anomalies in them that students have to go in and then identify. This platform allows the instructors to author their own content, so the developers don't have to worry about that, which is excellent. And we've just seen such great retention of knowledge, and we've seen such great time to talent increase based on our trainings here. So that's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a common theme here with training, and we're seeing very same thing at Magic Leap. There's a lot of interest in training deployments and a lot of immediate value that you can realize from onboarding and training applications. Paul, I'm going to go to you next. So you and I have known each other for a long time now. I think we met in 2013. Yeah. Our first conversation was on, I remember very distinctly, the issues that we were running into. Problems we were having converting models from NURB to polygons. So there's a lot of issues and operational challenges that we face in deploying AR. I'd love to learn some of the mistakes and maybe directions, course changes that you've had to make over the last decade as you've deployed AR.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. It's a good one. I am going to talk a little, probably my answer will be framed around our platform called BARC, which is the Boeing Augmented Reality Kit. It's a software platform for work instruction delivery in the factory. So not really focused on training, more on actual operational day-to-day use by mechanics and electricians, technicians building aircraft. I would say one of the course corrections we made, BARC initially was a collection of apps, and we were building like new apps for each need or use case that arose from one of our programs. We would start working on an app, and actually initially the content for the app would be baked into it. It would be manually kind of compiled into the app. So that was fine for very limited deployment, but we quickly realized that that wasn't going to scale very well because we can't keep building apps and we can't maintain all these apps. And more importantly, we don't want the content to be, chance of it going stale. And I know we're going to maybe talk a little bit more about that later. So we made a kind of a conscious decision. That was actually when we started calling it BARC. It was around 2016. We were going to combine these use cases into just 4 apps, which we did. And then we built a whole back end for converting that NERD CAD data into a lightweight format. It was all automated and we felt could be scaled. And then we continued down that path, and now actually recently we've now actually combined all of the factory use cases into a single app. And we've componentized the code base, and we can maybe get into that later. But yeah, I think over time we've morphed our approach, and we've kind of grown, and now I think we actually have a very, I'll say, a very scalable solution. Maybe I can share more as we talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, I know content is a major problem across the industry. Kevin, what are some ways that you guys have leveraged existing content, or how are you handling and managing content within your company?
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest thing that we do, especially considering getting content from those CAD systems into a headset, into an iPad, anything like that, it really starts kind of looking at it early and just making sure that you have that infrastructure and then the integration with those systems that you already have in place, because anything else is just going to be duplicated work. So I know it's been reiterated here probably over and over, but I'll even jump on board. Getting security and IT involved as early as possible is probably still not early enough. But any time that any of this work or even the data starts to get duplicated, you're losing ROI, you're going to lose interest, and you're just it's not going to roll out nearly as fluidly. So,
yeah, absolutely. Rich, I know you're developing a lot of custom content for your training modules. What does that path usually look like? How do you generate that content? Where does it come from?
We start with basically our procedures that we publish in our LMS for the team members. And we take those procedures and sit down as a team, and we figure out what that's going to look like in the VR environment. And then we work with our partner Pixo to help us really build that. And we rely heavily on outside partners to help us get there. So we don't have an internal team yet developed, so I think we're probably spending way more money than we probably need to. So after talking to a lot of y'all here, a lot of you do it in-house, but we do most of that with help from partners on the outside. But it's very collaborative. And we've definitely learned along the way when it comes to that content. Just so y'all know, those of you in here, one of the mistakes we made in the beginning with the content is that we the first module, we were able to do like a one-for-one LMS procedures, input it into the milkshake machine. That didn't work. That method didn't hold true for the others. So you can't cram a traditional learning style into a new way of learning. So that's one of the lessons we learned when it came to that content development.
Yeah, that's great. Emily, I know Newport News has been in the XR space for a long time now. What are some of the biggest lessons that your team has learned over the years about deploying this technology?
So the biggest one seems really obvious. You need to have a solid deployment strategy before you start looking at scaling. At the very beginning of our VR training project, we call it Observer. We were literally sideloading the APKs on the headsets every time we did a release. And that was very manual and very time-consuming and not at all scalable. As more devices were being bought, it just became more and more of a headache. So 100%, there's a ton of vendors here today pitching their solutions for device management. Have that in hand. And then the other thing I would add is that it's really important to have, as you develop this content, with 3D content being what it is, you need to have a good diversity of testers. And beyond what you kind of typically think for diversity, you want to look at people with different height. You want to look at people that are left-handed versus right-handed. You want to look at people that might see differently or have trouble seeing different colors, things like that. So those would be my two major things.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Zohair, I want to drill in on this topic a little bit more. So particularly on testing, what does it look like when you go and deploy and test these solutions in the real world?
Yeah, that's a great start off to the answer. What I'll add is that diversity is the right word. So for us, when we're doing testing, one thing that we have factories around the world. So you'll have places where technology may not be known. It may not be accepted. It may not be as comfortable to use as it is here. It may not be as widespread. So you have the user experience diversity, right? Which is the user experience in terms of the colors, in terms of people's abilities and so on. But you might even have, in some cases, literacy. And what I mean by literacy is being able to use technology, right? Sometimes you go to a place and they've never seen a headset. Sometimes they've never even seen our modern smartphones, right? They might be still on older versions of smartphones or not even have smartphones. They may still have mobile phones without any other capability. So you have to go in there and you're basically taking this really futuristic looking thing and you're putting it on their head and you're promising them that it won't hurt them. And they're turning it on and they're seeing lights and colors and things and it's a lot, right? I mean, it's a lot to really to take in, especially, and then you tell them to go do their job and they're going to be judged on how they're using it. And I mean, it's a lot of things to take in when you just show up with something. So to testing, you want to take a sample of that. Obviously, it can't represent the entire population, but you have to choose your sample very intelligently, and you have to kind of put them all together in a same space virtually, and be able to test it out and see what they're looking at, what they're feeling, how comfortable it is, how long you're going to use it, right? So there's an entire test suite that you may basically have to create. We call it user acceptance testing. I'm sure you probably call it something similar. But there's an entire suite of things that you have to go through, an entire checklist. And sometimes the hardest part is not getting the sponsorship. It's actually getting the user buy-in, right? So you can get all the executives sign off on whatever you want, but if you take that and you go to the shop floor and the the person that you're putting it on, just after you walk away, they take it off and put it to the side. You failed, right? Regardless of how much sponsorship you got. So sometimes it's a top-down and a bottom-up approach. You kind of do them in parallel, and that's where testing becomes really important. So it's something that needs to be carefully crafted, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. We can do all of this work to develop this amazing solution, but at the end of the day, if it's not used by somebody on the floor, then it's not quite worth it. So we've gone through the process of developing an application. We've deployed it. We've got buy-in from the people that are down in the shops or in the stores. And now we have to go back and prove this technology to our leadership, and we have to convince everyone that there should be a more significant investment in scaling this technology. So Paul, I'll start with you. What are some ways that you measure success of your projects? Because we obviously all see the value and the vision, but there's a lot of persuasion and a lot of selling internally in order to have this technology adopted. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, for us, it's all about just measuring the impact and the effectivity in terms of human performance and completing the task and collecting data on how effective it is. So the two main things that we look at would be first pass quality in terms of when jobs or installation plans are completed, do they get bought off first time by a quality representative, and time to complete the job. And we've studied both quite extensively. We actually started with an academic study. We published it with Iowa State University. That's probably going back about 10 years now. You can find that paper. It was published through ITSEC, I think in 2014. And it was a controlled user study, and we had a mock assembly. We ran 50 people through this process of building. It was a mock wing, actually, a small mock wing. And there were about 40 steps to completing this, and then we graded them on the time it took to do the job versus the number of mistakes they made. And some people used augmented reality, some people used a 2D PDF, and some people used paper. And what the results showed us roughly were about a 25% reduction in time, and if I recall, something like a 70% reduction in defects. So then that was the initial justification that we needed to pursue internally further. So then we started a big effort on one of our programs for installation of wiring. I mentioned this yesterday on a panel. We did a large pilot, I want to say it was around 2018, 2017, over 6 airplanes, and over 1,000 installation plans were completed. And an installation plan, just to give you an idea, is about 2 hours worth of manual work to install wire bundles. So about 2,000 hours worth of usage, probably about 20 to 25 electricians, as I said, over 6 airplanes, about 3 months. And we collected all the data, and we looked at for the IPs that were completed, the installation plans completed, how long it took using the HoloLens. We were using HoloLens 1 at the time, versus prior data on previous airplanes for the same jobs. And actually, remarkably, we saw almost exactly the same results as what we saw in the Iowa State academic study. About 20% reduction in time, and actually we saw about 80% reduction in defects. So that's the kind of data that we need and we have used to justify the work. Although I will say, I think maybe going down to the top-down and the bottoms-up approach, we had major, I'll say, usability challenges back then, and we still have some. We don't have as many now, but we still have some. And we could not overcome that back then. And so that, even though we had really great data, all the executives were super excited about the potential, that line of work actually stopped. And maybe I can get into that more later, perhaps, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about what success looks like in your projects as well? How do you prove that?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if I've done a good enough introduction, but I definitely, is similar to Paul, I work mostly AR and MR and kind of getting that out on the shop floor. So I really want to double down kind of on what Paul was saying, and with those first initial pilots, what we picked, especially if it's something that maybe you're only doing once, it's still something that we had past data that we could compare to what we were doing. We ran into a lot of issues where trying to find that ROI and trying to measure it, if you went and did it again to see how long it would have taken, we were losing any ROI that we had gained. So for us, it was a lot more about kind of those initial pilots and demonstrations and just making sure that we picked ones that we knew, we had previous data, just like Paul was saying, that we could immediately compare and say, hey, these are what we, these are the numbers that we're beating, these are what we're getting now. And then, again, just kind of running into less errors. We're not, making complicated go-backs and having to make fixes and things like that. And then I always like to throw in, too, there is just if you get it on the end user, the technician in our case, the earlier you get it on them, the more that they can help develop that situation. And then a lot of the time, the more they're going to enjoy doing it, too. And if you kind of enjoy what you're doing, I will always argue that you're going to do it better, faster, easier. So,
absolutely. Emily, I mean, there's so many different directions that we can take this technology, and there's so much potential. But practically speaking, today, where are you seeing the uses of the technology actually gaining some traction and being deployed?
So we've been talking a lot about training, and I would say that is an immediate, easy first use case to go for, both in augmented and virtual reality. Step-by-step procedures are great for augmentation and VR training. So training is one, and I would think that as you're talking about scaling these things in particular, certainly as you go through your proofs of concept and your pilots, you want a very specific use case that you're targeting. But as you think about scaling, I would encourage you to start thinking about building a platform instead where the subject matter experts are the ones controlling the content. So, yes.
Great. Rich, I know you're deploying some great training materials at Chick-fil-A today. What are some of the considerations that you have had to take into account as far as infrastructure? What does it take to actually deploy at scale from an IT infrastructure perspective?
That's a great question, and one that we're wrestling with right now is we're just wrapping up our pilots, essentially, and planning for 2024. And some of the hurdles that we're dealing with is really, it's not so much deploying, as that seems to be relatively easy when you involve your IT folks and your legal folks pretty early on. When they're all in the loop and they've kind of given the thumbs up, it seems pretty easy there. One of the things we're wrestling around right now is the adoption of the technology when deploying. Coming from, I was a teacher, my former career 10 years ago, And one of the things I saw us do in school districts at the time was deploy all this technology out to the school districts and expect teachers and students to just know how to use it and just deploy it in their classroom. And that didn't happen. Unfortunately, a lot of that technology just sat on the shelves and got outdated quickly. And so one of the things we're wrestling with, how do we, we saw that happen, we see it happen time and time again when this new technology rolls out. How do we fix that for our restaurants? How do we prepare the ground ahead of time so that people are trained and understand the importance of the technology so it gets used, rather than us forcing this out on our folks, and then they don't fully understand it, they're not trained in it, and it just sits there and a year or two goes by, and now the technology, as you all know, it's outdated. So how do we prepare the ground ahead of time? So that's our biggest challenge right now when it comes to deployment. How do we prepare for that? And that's a big part of the puzzle that we really don't pay attention to in the enterprise space. So I think more attention to that is needed.
Yeah, agreed. Zohair, what is your opinion and thoughts on the current head-mounted display market? What headsets are you exploring, and where do you think that market is going?
Yeah, so if you can think of a headset in the market that's available, at least on this side of the world, most likely we've used it, and we have it, we've used it, we've tried it out. I think for scale, you have to be very careful on what you're trying to use the headset for. For us, when we're looking at headsets, especially in a factory setting, and I know that might be the same for most people here as well, is that you have to look at safety, right? I mean, is it blocking any peripheral vision? Is it heavy? Does it get hot? How long does the battery last? Is it comfortable to wear? Can you do hot swapping? And all the things that I'm mentioning, the headsets today in the market don't address all of those things in a way that it can last an entire shift, right? And a shift is, depending on where you are, it could be 8 hours or more, 9 hours, whatever it is. But it's a full day, right? So you have someone that will be walking around, they're picking things up, they're touching things, they're putting things together, and you don't want them to be uncomfortable, right? I mean, your whole point of this was to make their job easier, and if they have to go take it off because they have a nice red ring around their nose because they've been wearing it for just 10 minutes, then it's not a good thing, right? So basically, I'd say that I think the market in terms of headsets and hardware has a lot of advancement that needs to be done. I know it's not easy. We've been working with a lot of companies that have been trying this for a long time, and we've been doing this now for a while too. So it's good to see the progress, but I think there's a long way to go until you can have headsets be just be put on and not be noticed, right? And so I think one comment I'll make on that is that when you start doing that deployment, kind of going back to the last point, is we didn't talk about the metrics in terms of how you define them. So we kind of talked about what metrics do we use, but you have to also do an exercise before that, which is how you identify the metrics that you're going to use to determine success. I mean, that could probably be a whole different panel, but it would be, if we talk about Paul and how he got to that study, that is a very important piece, right? Is how did you figure out that was the metric that you were going to use to justify whether or not your pilot or your technology is successful. So that leads into your headsets too, right? So if you're going in there and you don't really know what problem you're trying to solve or how you're going to measure if it's successful, then you're just putting a bunch of devices on the factory floor, and just like Rich said, they're going to be in the corner collecting dust.
Great. Kevin, I'd also like to get your thoughts on the current headsets.
Yeah, definitely. I just love coming to expos and conferences like this and just seeing new players in the market and new technologies coming out. It seems like on a monthly basis at this point. I think that can only drive innovation, and it's going to change. It's going to make more and more improvements and more advancements, and I think that's going to be good for everybody, honestly. So
that's great. Paul, I'll go to you next. So you've been doing this for a long time. What are some of the things that you wish you knew really early on when you were going to deploy AR at scale, or attempt to deploy AR at scale in the first few years?
That's interesting. I think probably I wish I knew back then the effect of all these little things we're talking about, how they compound on each other. And do actually seriously limit adoption. I mean, like we talked about, headsets heating up, or battery life not being where it needs to be, or the experience of logging on is not smooth, or whatever. Each one of those in itself, you think, oh, that's not so bad. I mean, so it gets a little warm, no big deal. But when you add them all up, it actually it creates an experience that, in my opinion, is really not where it needs to be. So I wish I knew that back then, and how hard it would be to overcome all of these small things. And as an industry, obviously, we've made huge progress. Thinking back to when I started, it took three, I'm going to date myself, it took 3 workstations, like physical towers, to produce an AR experience. I remember a company called Diffusion out of France flew to California to meet with us, and they showed us their augmented reality platform, 3 workstations, big Sony Handycam, and when you see what we can do now, we've come a long way. I mean, it's very impressive, but I just wish I knew back then how hard it would be to get things across the finish line and overcome all these little...
Yeah, absolutely. Rich, same question. What would you say to somebody who's just starting out in their deployment of AR at scale?
There's probably lots I would say. There's so many things that we've learned along the way. I would say one of the biggest things is to, you don't have to boil the ocean or, do everything at once. Start small. Don't let this journey scare you. Get smart. I know there's a lot of good folks, well-intentioned people in this room that are trying to provide services for us, but get smart fast. You be the controller of what you want to do. If you're working with third-party folks, like we've done a lot, find a good partner, somebody that's going to listen to your needs and really dive in and to understand what you need. Not necessarily even what you want. Sometimes what you want is not what you need. So a good partner is important, and just get smart. That's all. And you don't have to do it all at once.
Excellent, great. Well, thank you all for answering all of these questions. I do want to open it up now to the audience. If there are any questions, we've got one over here on the left. If we could get, we got a lot of them. Okay. We'll start, straight here because we have a microphone there.
Hi, Dan Mitchell with C&H Industrial. You mentioned a statistic, I think I heard a few different statistics of 75 to 80% reduction in defect. That's a staggering statistic. I was just wondering what software and hardware you were using when you saw those results.
We were using the HoloLens 1, and the software was our own. It was the Bark platform, written in Unity. At the time, the device was not connected to our corporate network, so we actually had to do a lot of work moving files around and maintaining configuration of these work packages, which was actually one of the limiting factors on adoption. But yes, HoloLens 1 and homegrown developed software in Unity.
Great, next question.
Yep. Vi Kellerson, Oberon Technologies. I'll tag on to that. You mentioned the results, but then you said the project didn't continue. Could you tell us a little bit about what hindered the continuance of the project with such strong results?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed the last part. You wanted to know just...
What prevented you from continuing the project?
Oh, okay, got it. It was a number of things. I think Zohair said it best, the top-down and bottom-up. We didn't have the bottom-up. We definitely had the top down, and in fact, at the time, we were, several of my colleagues in the room here were involved in this project. We had a lot of momentum all the way up to our CEO, who was flying out to Seattle to see what we were doing, and it was really awesome. We definitely had the buy-in of all the top leadership of the company. We didn't have the bottom up. That's, I think, because of things like the usability challenges, off the network, ergonomic issues, like as I mentioned, lots of little things. When you add them up, generate an experience where I like to think of it as the burden is more than the benefit. And from the user's perspective, right, they're getting paid either way. So, just a very narrow view of this. If you're a user, you're a mechanic. Personally, you really don't have a vested interest in time and quality. But if we can make, if we can improve their daily life, make maybe less stress, less frustration, things that they do care about, and if the benefit in those areas is perceived to be better than the burden, then you do get the bottoms up. And back then we didn't have that, so I think that's what ended it.
Great. Where's the microphone? Right over there.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Alan Gatormson. I'm with Horizon Air, and my question is from a training perspective. At the end user point, how do you generate buy-in for use of a VR or AR device when the previous training device still got the job done?
I can take that one. So when we introduce it to someone that's going on for example, if they've already been trained on something else and they were trained in a traditional method, and now we're going to train them on something new or different with VR, the first thing we'll do is we'll tell them why it's going to be different, and then we have them try it, and then we have them tell us why they liked it more, and then we take that reason and we tell it to the next person. So you kind of compound it as you keep going, and you will get negative feedback sometimes. Maybe it's because the colors are different, or maybe it wasn't as high resolution as they thought it was going to be, or something like that. But it's kind of going off of Paul's point again, is that you have to start with that end user. So you start with them, you see what they say, you go back to the drawing board if necessary, and you just kind of take all that feedback and you keep going forward. So how is it different from when the job got done before? The job may have been done before, but it wasn't done as well. And if it was done as well, then you probably wouldn't have even had VR training, right? So there was clearly a gap that you started to fill that is starting to gain the traction, right? I don't know if anyone wants to add.
Emily,
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that you want to find kind of your champions in the user community and really lean on them and let them tell the story. We had one woman do a confined space training and miss an issue, and she experienced a pass out animation, and she actually came to tears because she was just thinking about her two daughters at home and how if this had happened in real life, she wouldn't be able to go home to them. And that kind of emotional impact is just such a great story, and just really lean on your champions to tell that kind of story.
And I'll just add on to everything they just said is 100% I agree with, but just basically we put our end user in the headset. And when we do that, it kind of blows their mind, because one thing to talk about it and say, oh yeah, I can do this and that and you can do that, but when you put the headset on them, to see our C-level folks put the headset on and they're like, they're blown away. They got it when you were talking about it before, but when you put them in the headset, then they really get it. So simply just put the headset on them and they start generating all kinds of buzz. Let them be your evangelist.
Great. Right here.
Yep. Brian Laughlin, Boeing Company. I'm curious what, both positive and negative, what were the most surprising things that you found? What kind of aha moments or epiphanies that, from a negative perspective as well as a positive perspective, that you guys experienced in doing your implementation?
Yeah, I got one to start. I think the biggest surprise that I had going into it, I always kind of knew that we would have to be our own champions for the technology and getting it out there. As we start hitting more to scale, I was surprised I've almost had to become the devil's advocate. There are certain use cases and certain situations where they want to use it for everything. And we have to be the first people to kind of pull them back off that cliff, maybe recommend other technology. There are just situations where if you start going way too hard, too fast, and using the technology in the wrong spots, again, you're going to lose any of that ROI that you've had on the other ones. It's not going to look good from up above, and you're just going to start to lose it. So that one definitely surprised me, having to kind of go into it with a 50-50 of selling it, but not too much.
Any other surprises? No. Okay, great. Where's next? Right.
Good morning. Thank you guys for your time today. I'm Lance Benoit with ATCO. I'm curious, through you guys' deployment, did you have any metrics surrounding safety for your success? If so, what were they, and how did you measure them?
Well, I don't have a whole lot to say. Just that we did do one survey of users. I think we surveyed about 30 users who had, several hundred hours worth of use, and we asked them if they experienced any headaches, neck pain, or things like that. And if I recall, we only had one report of some headache, but we weren't sure if it was related to the use of the device or not. The only thing I can say is we haven't had any, that I'm aware of, any safety incidents. So we haven't witnessed any decrease or any, any issues with safety, but I think we've had a hard time really measuring any benefits, I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah, Tom Ditzler from J.J. Keller. I'm curious, the panelists who are using VR for training, what is going to be the shelf life of the content until that experience becomes stale or ineffective and you need to refresh it?
Well, that's a great question. That's one of the, I think, things we're all wrestling with in L&D, because things are changing so rapidly, right? I mean, the minute you turn around, there's a new process or procedure that's put in place. So the shelf lives are where it used to be a year or two has drastically been reduced, and us in L&D have had to adapt to a new pace of life in L&D, with the change cycle for our products and procedures. So yeah, that is something we're wrestling with. So how do we fix that? Do we go out and spend thousands of dollars just to change something because it's a new rollout, for us it would be a seasonal item that just got pushed out? Do we go in and create a whole new VR experience for the milkshake machine just because we're now selling the new peppermint milkshake? Or do we just say that that's okay? I have a little thing I call the 90-10 rule, where it's like we can do 90% of what we can in the VR, but there's a 10% that we just are going to have to do still in person. And maybe some of those things are just 10% things that we're okay with, and we can just teach in person. But yeah, we're going to have to figure that out, I think, at Chick-fil-A.
VR is also great for kind of teaching people how to think through scenarios rather than like, oh, I need to specifically check behind this ladder for an arc strike or something very, very specific. If you can make your content more generic so they're working through the process of how to figure something out, even better, it's not going to go stale as quickly.
Great. Are there any other questions?
Over here.
Oh, over here.
Stan Galansky with CB Tech, Systems Integrator. Question, have any of y'all had to choose a headset that also had the functionality of tracking your employee, maybe across a shipyard or across an assembly line or manufacturing facility?
Like location-based? So we haven't been doing that. I know there are vendors that provide that as part of the device management solutions that they offer. So that is an option, but we aren't taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and we haven't done that either.
Yes, 2 more questions, and we'll wrap up.
So my name is Justin Piedra. I'm from Subsea Solutions, LLC here in Houston. My question is, when it comes to optimizing XR content, kind of like what Paul was kind of referring to, like how he kind of managed his files and was going along, kind of along those lines. When it comes to optimizing XR content, delivering and reducing latency, what specific network protocols, compression techniques, or even server infrastructure configurations have you found most effective in achieving seamless XR experience at scale?
Well, so I would definitely say we take advantage of the cloud as much as possible. We use decimation techniques to get the models down to a point where they can be rendered on the headset very easily. But yeah, just freeing as many constraints as possible so you can take advantage of the cloud and all that it offers is, if you can, because there's certainly times where you need to stay on premise, is where you kind of want to be. Anybody have any?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. I mean, we do the same thing with cloud infrastructure, but we are using all on-prem, our own Boeing's cloud infrastructure. For our use cases, we're not typically so concerned with like flashy graphics or like, high frame rates or anything. Our use cases are more about, showing a mechanic, here's where the thing goes, or here's where the bundle, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to look pretty, and it doesn't even matter, to be honest, if it's a little laggy. I mean, some of the feedback that the users might give us, well, when I move around, it's a bit laggy. Well, maybe so, but does it really limit, the information? Does it, can you still consume the information you need? And usually it's yes. So we try to, we do limit, we decimate models mostly using pixies, and we do limit typically to about 3/4 of a million polygons per scene. which if anyone on a HoloLens 2, if anyone knows, will be okay. It won't be great, but it'll be okay. So, just a few comments on that.
Great. And one last question over here on the left.
Hey, I'm Andy Cruz with Halion, and I had a question about what data points you use to send over to the LMS, especially like thinking through the processes that you were talking about at Chick-fil-A. What points do you look for in a person taking that training and then have those sent over to the LMS, and how do you send just those specific data points over?
Yeah, no, great question. One of the things we've learned with VR is that they can capture everything, right? In so many non-traditional ways. Like we're in a normal traditional LMS, there's like, did they pass? How long did it take them to get through the training and such? With VR, you can record and capture a lot of data. And so we're wrestling with that still. What do we want? At the end of the day, right now, currently, it's just like how fast did they become proficient? That's what we're trying to measure. Can they do the process in order efficiently, and how quickly can we get them there? So those are some of the things we're looking for at the moment. So we're trying to figure out, what do we need to know? Every little detail. Do they reach here first instead of over here? And if they are reaching there, why are they reaching there? So I'm sure there's more to come there, and some of our folks that are smarter than me at Chick-fil-A will want to have that data at some point.
Great. Well, we could clearly continue this conversation for a lot longer, but thank you all for taking the time to be on our panel and to have this discussion, and we'll go ahead and pass it off to Mark.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you very much.